Hey guys, welcome back to the channel, and today we're going to be reacting to
Europe's Ukraine peace plan explained.
After US President Donald Trump signaled that the US would step back from defending Ukraine, France's President Emmanuel Macron and UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer flew to meet him in Washington, D.C. But on Friday, a disastrous meeting between Trump and Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky left Europe scrambling to come up with a peace plan without the US. Then on Monday evening, Trump announced that the US was suspending military aid to Ukraine, adding yet more urgency to Europe's efforts. So in this video, we'll recap what's been happening.
Why they're spelling Zelensky with double Y? Is that how his name is spelled? I never seen. I always thought it was only one Y.
Recently. The peace plan outlined at the London summit and what Europe will do next about Ukraine. We're getting remarkably close, and subscribe today. First though, let's recap what's been happening. Last month, Trump signaled a shift in US foreign policy, indicating that the US may not commit to a security guarantee for Ukraine. Trump also held what he called a lengthy and highly productive phone call with Russian President Vladimir Putin. The US held peace talks with Russia in Saudi Arabia without Ukraine or Europe's involvement, and Trump's defense secretary, Pete Hegseth, suggested that Ukraine should abandon its NATO bid and concede territory to Russia. This all prompted concerns in the European media that Trump's stance on Ukraine was approximating that of Putin. But if there was any doubt remaining regarding the official US position, then it was quickly
Can you
stamped
imagine
out.
they went through all of that just give up your land?
Yeah, so they get nothing basically. They give up the land. They give up NATO hope. So what
That's
they
not
get?
appealing.
Yeah, what they get? They don't get nothing.
By the events of
I
last
guess the
week.
end of war.
Trump had tabled a US-Ukraine minerals deal that would have grown
I mean, if they wanted the end of war, they could come up with that deal themselves. Like they wouldn't need Trump to intervene. That's a deal. That's not a deal. That's a loss. That's basically waving a white flag. We lost. Here, take that land. We quit.
granted the US access to billions of dollars worth of mineral resources, oil, and gas in eastern Ukraine, without offering a Ukrainian security guarantee in return. Trump argued that the revenue from the sale of Ukrainian resources would compensate the US for its previous spending on Ukrainian aid, although we should say that he's reliably overstated how much the US has given to Ukraine.
So
Anyway,
it's not like they're gonna give them money. It's more like, hey, we have these minerals, but no one really knows how much minerals they have, and then so they're gonna have to work and sell those minerals.
Kinda, yeah.
He was scheduled to formalize this minerals deal at the
And also, looking at this chart though, that's fair. US has given less than Europe, but let's not forget US is one country, Europe is a whole bunch of countries. So you're basically comparing a whole continent / union versus one country. So US have given a lot of money to
And
Ukraine.
the percentage is quite high.
Yeah.
White House on Friday. But to improve Ukraine's chances of actually getting a US security guarantee, prior to the meeting, both Macron and Starmer traveled to visit Trump earlier in the week and made the case for a broad transatlantic alliance supporting Ukraine. But as we're sure you've seen, Zelensky's meeting with Trump descended into a very ugly, very public argument in which Trump accused Zelensky of being ungrateful for US support and gambling with World War III. Zelensky was then reportedly asked to leave the White House, with the US-Ukraine relationship in tatters and no deal signed. Which brings us on to the recent.
Where does he go?
Well, so I was gonna say, I wonder if Ukraine has an embassy here. I think they should, because
How?
every country has an embassy.
Oh, I thought you had to be part of the participating countries to have an embassy.
I think no, like every major country has an embassy. So I think Ukraine should have an embassy in the States. So, he probably went to the embassy, but I've wondered if Ukraine would withdraw the embassy from, because that would be like, okay, we're really not fucking that.
Summit. On Sunday, Starmer hosted
Let me
18
see,
world
I think they
leaders,
have
mainly from
embassy.
Europe, but also including Canada's Prime Minister Justin Trudeau and Turkey's Foreign Minister Hakan Fidan. The talks led to a vague outline of a European peace deal for Ukraine, with 4 main points. These were to continue to provide military support to Ukraine and increase
Yeah, there's an embassy of Ukraine in DC.
In DC?
Yeah.
economic pressure on Russia, that Ukraine must be present at any peace talks, that Ukraine's defense capabilities
Oh, hold up. What is this 4 main points of you? Okay.
must be boosted to deter further Russian aggression, and that a coalition of the willing will be
So continue support for Ukraine and economic pressure on Russia. Okay. Ukraine should be present in all peace talks. Makes sense. Ukraine's defense should be boosted to deter future attacks. Okay. Formation of a coalition of the willing to protect Ukraine's future.
So what did they do in return?
But what does Russia get out? I'm not seeing why would Russia agree to it, because these kind of seems like everything that has been done so far. I don't see like anything new there. Hmm.
We formed to defend a peace deal in Ukraine and guarantee its future security. Now, at this point, it's not 100% clear who this will include, but it will be led by France and the UK and will probably include the Baltic states, Finland,
Yep.
and Canada. Conversely, Poland and Spain have both ruled
Wow,
out committing troops to
Lithuania.
Ukraine. So
I think Poland as well would probably, because this Ukraine is their neighbor, so I think it's in their interest.
presumably won't be included. Perhaps the big question here is whether Germany will join in. While Germany was generally pretty cautious about its support for Ukraine under Olaf Scholz, the incoming Chancellor Friedrich Merz has taken a much more hawkish line and even floated the idea of a new European defence alliance to replace NATO. Beyond that, Macron also suggested to the French press that there could be a 1-month ceasefire in the air, at sea, and on energy infrastructure to see if Putin was serious about negotiations, although other European leaders have since pushed back on this. Anyway, the big question here is how Europe is actually going to pay for all of this. Even for those countries that aren't in this so-called coalition of the willing, filling the void left by the US and increasing defense spending to 3 or even 4% of GDP will cost a lot of money. While individual countries have different plans in place, Germany, for instance, is considering a constitutional amendment to loosen its long-standing fiscal rule, the debt brake, before the new parliament sits, there are at least 2 continent-wide initiatives worth mentioning. First, France, Germany, the UK, and others are discussing a proposal to seize 200 billion euros of frozen Russian central bank assets for Ukraine, with French officials suggesting that Europe seize the assets if Moscow violates a future ceasefire deal in Ukraine. The second proposal.
I thought the assets were already frozen, though. Weren't they? Or I
I
guess.
thought that was temporarily. At least,
Well, but temporarily never finished because the war is still ongoing. So I guess.
I think I'm thinking of here, like any ties. If you have like like a I think I'm thinking of domestic. Because at one point, a lot of people in like Sunny Isles were in trouble because they didn't have access to their funds.
Mm-hmm. I think so. Maybe it's frozen, but it's not seized, right? So like
Oh.
the people can't access that money, but the government hasn't taken it. I think what they're considering here is to actually just take that money straight up.
Announced on Tuesday morning by the EU is the Rearm Europe initiative, which basically involves borrowing 150 billion euros at the EU level, which EU member states can then use to fund defence spending. This is a pretty dramatic move. The EU already owes about 300 billion euros in money it borrowed to help member states through the pandemic, with no plan of how to pay it back. So borrowing more money will only make that problem more acute. So with that in mind, what happens next? Well, on Thursday, the EU will hold a summit in Brussels, where EU Commission President Ursula von der Leyen says that she'll present a comprehensive defence plan. Given that Trump has suspended aid to Ukraine, EU leaders will be working as quickly as possible to come up with a military support plan, because a long pause in US aid could give Russia a significant advantage on the battlefield. Meanwhile, the Kremlin is increasing its rhetorical attacks on the West, whose unity it's long sought to undermine. Dmitry Peskov, Putin's spokesperson, said on Monday that the fragmentation of the collective West has begun. Russia has also ruled out a role for European peacekeeping troops after a peace deal, and
So the proposed European plan that they had, one of the 4 was like the coalition of joint support. So that's what I assume would be the peacekeeper forces in Ukraine.
argues that Europe's continued military support for Ukraine is a sign that Europe doesn't really want peace. Perhaps the biggest question, though, is whether Ukraine can repair its ties with the US. Zelensky says that he still wants to sign Trump's mineral deal, but will now be under pressure to repair relations with Trump if he wants to get back US military support. This would likely involve Zelensky apologizing to Trump for, in Trump's words, disrespecting the US. But Zelensky has also made clear that he wants the White House to recognize that Russia is the aggressor, given that it launched a full-scale invasion of Ukraine back in 2022. But as Starmer and Melonia pointed out, the US remains an important partner for Europe on defense, for now. So Zelensky may have to set aside his grievances with Trump for the sake of Ukraine and Europe's future. If you didn't know, Too Long is our regular physical.
Interesting, because so Russia doesn't want any peacekeepers in Ukraine, and basically the proposal EU has is the peacekeepers. So if they can't agree on that,
How come Russia doesn't want peacekeepers?
I guess I don't know. I don't know if it is possible they are truly convinced that EU would try to attack them, maybe. However, I think what's more likely is they want to preserve their options to attack Ukraine in the future. I don't think it's. I think that's what it's about, but that's just my opinion. Mm.
Guys, of course, let us know your thoughts. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Join the Discord. And as always, 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 share as much kindness as possible.